All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm representing the Climate Justice Design Fellowship. I'm part of a team of people who are working with a group of awesome fellows to push design and data tools for climate advocacy. And the fellows are all around the country doing really amazing projects, working with their local communities. And so we've been doing these Tuesday afternoon seminars, and I'm delighted today we have two speakers. It's very exciting, both joining us from Northeastern University, coincidentally. Starting off, we have Lily Song, who's an urban planner. She's assistant professor of race and social justice in the built environment at Northeastern, and her interests lie at the nexus of race, class, and gender politics of space, infrastructure-based mobilizations, and reparative planning and design. And so she's going to talk to us probably mostly about the latter and how we take action. And we also have joining us Jose Menendez Lopez, who's a graphic designer and educator in marine science and landscape architecture, but he has a multidisciplinary practice that investigates topics of community engagement, health communication, social justice, and expanding canons of graphic design to highlight Latin American and Caribbean practices, among others, and also to kind of design spatial justice and ecological narratives. And so we're really excited to have you both. And with that, I'll let you guys begin.
Great. Jose, should I go first then, given the timing?
Of course, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And Jill, I'm also gonna say that I don't think it's a coincidence that Jose and I are both at Northeastern, because the university is trying to build a very large sort of interdisciplinary community. And I've been meeting a lot of radical faculty, and it's been really exciting because a lot of people are doing place-based and community-based work. So let me share my PowerPoint. Let's see the view. Okay, does that look okay? You see everything. Okay, I'm just gonna go. Hi, everybody. I'm so pleased to be here with the CJDF group today. I've been working with Jax from New Orleans, and it's been such a delightful experience and just, learning about her work. And so, I hope I get a chance to learn about the work that the other fellows are doing. And today, I'm just here to kind of share some of the design action research that I'm doing around reparative urban planning and design, and give you a few examples of projects. So I'm not going to introduce myself again since Jill did that for me. Thank you. So, to kind of start, my work focuses on infrastructure, urban infrastructure, and acts of repair. As we, know, I know a lot of climate justice activists are focused on urban infrastructure. They're socio-technical systems of vital facilities and services that we need to basically function, in terms of cities and regions and as a society. They're also sources of violence and inequality, and they're intertwined with environmental extraction and destruction. In the US context, they also express and deepen racial capitalism, where people are segregated and differentiated in racialized ways, and our labor and our value is also hierarchical, stratified in ways that foster capitalist accumulation. And at the same time, urban infrastructure presents transformative opportunities in terms of climate and ecosystem resilience, justice, reclaiming commons and publics. So this is a quote from Deborah Cohen. She writes this in Infrastructures of Empire and Resistance that, yes, infrastructure enables all manner of things. It can foster transformation as well as reproduction. In contrast to top-down infrastructure, communities, movements, networks, and nations assemble creative alternatives that respond to needs and desires for a different future as they help bring them into being. So, we see a lot of infrastructure that reproduces the status quo. This is an example from New York, where the city has reused rail lines and other sort of industrial era infrastructure for placemaking, in ways that attract so-called creatives, right? But really, to deepen speculative real estate development that deepens or that exacerbates displacement. And at the same time, people have been fighting for infrastructural justice, and to repair past and present harms, that are racialized. And so this photo on the left is from the South End of Boston, where there were anti-highway activists who got together and were also advocating for housing. And then the one on the right, of course, is a very famous photo of the Warren County environmental justice sort of movement, which birthed that movement nationally. And, that was about a toxic waste dump, but, a lot of place-based community mobilizations often focus on infrastructures that are extractive, invasive, polluting, unhealthy. And by now, designers and planners are more aware of, the just transition framework, which of course comes from climate justice activists, environmental justice activists. And, part of that entails divesting from the extractive economy, which is where we are today, unfortunately, with a more commodifying consumerist colonial worldview of domination, right, and exploitation, and then resources being extracted. Really the purpose is to enclose wealth and power. It's really a militarized kind of control, and then divesting out of that and investing in a more regenerative economy that's based on caring and sacredness worldviews, cooperative work, resource regeneration, and well-being, and deep modes of democratic governance. So I want to talk a bit about the design action research epistemology and methodology, and epistemology having to do with how we know what we know, and what we want to do with that knowledge. And so a lot of my research, I would say, is inspired by Black radicalism and also radical feminism and standpoint theory, this notion that people who are marginalized, whether it's by race or gender or sexuality, have a second sort of sight on the world because they know the dysfunctions of systems, whether they're infrastructures or built environments. And they understand that world from their lived embodied perspective, but also the dominant perspective, which they must know in order to survive. And so, that knowledge, I think, is really essential to addressing infrastructural issues, injustices, because we have to deal with the deepest sort of dysfunctions in order to actually even address, issues like environmental sustainability. And, people for whom whose comfort, infrastructures are designed around, don't necessarily know, what the stress points are and what needs to change. And so really building movements that are centered on the experiences and insights of marginalized populations is really key, to addressing collective issues. So the deepest common denominator, not the lowest common denominator, right? Also, in terms of knowledge, Eve Tuck, who's a decolonial participatory action researcher, has called for a moratorium on damage-centered research. And so many well-intentioned researchers, designers, social scientists often are trying to establish that something's wrong, a harm or injury has been done, particularly to racialized populations, so that they can achieve reparation. But in doing that, sometimes there's longer term repercussions of, rendering marginalized communities as depleted or damaged or broken. And what she argues for is re-envisioning research on Native communities, but also urban communities and other disenfranchised groups that don't only focus on the oppression, but also capture desire, aspirations, dreams, intricacies, contradictions, and informed seeking of lived lives that point toward becoming more of who they are. And I think that's really important to tap into the knowledge and aspirations, that marginalized communities bring. So in terms of, what we do with our knowledge, I think that social science and, even urban planning and design, the way that research is taught oftentimes is it's extractive, it's colonizing, it's about kind of looking in and trying to understand to, intervene, help, in some way. And alternatively, the social change sort of, model of research and action really, based on knowledge. This one's put out by Deepa Iyer is, it envisions more roles. So I think there's 10 roles. And, folks here might identify with different roles. And, it's a lot more about collective change. It's about movement building, and there's different roles that are non-traditional, traditional, and it's a lot less hierarchical and like institutional when we think about like who actually has these types of capacities, and skills. I'm not going to tell you which ones I identify with. You'll probably figure it out by the end of my presentation. So I'm also, in terms of like knowledge that has already existing knowledge, I'm drawing a lot from these different bodies of literature about repair and reparative work. So reparative planning, this is sort of a budding area, which interrogates how so much of planning and design is predicated on whiteness and white supremacy, and then tries to push that, push planning toward those actions aligned with reparations movements, which, in the US date back 3 centuries. And there's also cultural studies of infrastructural transition that really looks at how infrastructure can, open up transformative possibilities. STS on maintenance and repair, focused more on like sites of breakdown, maintenance and repair, less about reparations of that kind of racialized, harm that's been done and the need to repair that. Transitional justice comes from South Africa and other parts of the world that have experienced racial apartheid or, genocides. And there's a lot of frameworks around restorative and reparative justice, transitional justice, that can be transferred to planning and design work. And then the arts and creative community development is really generative in terms of how to think about arts participation and, people's sort of creativity, visual communication, how that can support organizing and democratic power building. So this is sort of how I'm thinking about reparative planning and design. Acts of repair, healing, and making whole that are born from brokenness and damage, but not defined by that, centering the margins as spaces of radical insight, openness, and possibility in moving toward more regenerative sort of systems, and then shifting planning and design methods and pedagogies and cultures in ways that uphold more sort of intergenerational knowledge, embodied knowledge, situated insights, and creative practices of frontline communities who are dealing with climate injustices and environmental and social injustices. And also, repair meaning decommodifying space and human relationships, which is really important given that we operate in a racial capitalist context. These are my core research questions: how infrastructure-based struggles and mobilizations led by frontline communities actually reveal and redress racial harms, including disproportionate environmental and climate vulnerability. How planners and designers can align our creative practices with these struggles and mobilizations, and then how our reparative planning and design initiatives can supplement and amplify the efforts of reparations movements. So I focused more on 1 and 2, and I'm kind of moving into the third research question. In terms of design action research, I'm going to share examples from the first 2. So I'm working, so I'm really defining design action research as contextually grounded. So it's place-based, it's rooted, it's relational, it's done with activists and movement builders. And it's really about social change. It's not like just holding on to knowledge to acquire it, but it's to actually, create change, together based on what a shared learning process. So the case in LA is around mobility infrastructures and more inclusive transit-oriented communities. In Boston, it's about arts and cultural infrastructures. And in Chicago, it's around food, arts and culture, and community spaces and public spaces. That's also about reparative design pedagogies and methods, which I won't go into today, but I'm happy to come back to in Q&A. So LA, which is occupied Gabrielino and Tongvaland. I have been working with the Alliance for Community Transit Los Angeles. I'm not going to go into this too much except to say that LA County voters approved taxes, so sales taxes that are financing like tens of billions of dollars in transit investments. It's heavily rail oriented when most transit riders actually use buses. Most transit riders are people of color, they're low income, there's a lot of women, elderly people, youth of color, right? And disabled people and people with who struggle with addictions as well. And many of them use buses. And there's also a huge influx into policing systems. They're really maintaining transit networks as like militarized, kind of surveilled spaces. There's been a lot of intimidation and harassment and citing related to that. That rail investment has also induced a construction boom and redevelopment projects that have upscaled housing and made neighborhoods really unaffordable to working families. So these are all sort of the challenges that working class communities of color in LA face. And so ACT LA is a coalition of, various advocates who are fighting for affordable housing, inclusive workforce and economic development and more. And they've led a series of advocacy campaigns. So the work that I did with them was more on the last, people's transit. So I'm gonna kind of focus on that today, just to kind of run through how we did that. But this is really advocating for better bus services, fare-free transit, since people already pay for transit through the sales taxes. And then ending Metro's $1 billion expenditure in police, and instead investing it in community sort of safety strategies. So the way we did this, I had a team of planning and design architecture students. We started mapping what unsafety actually results from, and like what are instances of unsafety on Metro? What are the actual conditions that lead to that? And then what are sort of the root conditions under like that, underlie that? And we were working with coalition members, and ACT LA staff, but also movement-based lawyers at UCLA and also at Howard University. So really, this is around like ACT LA's campaign, their organizing and sort of advocacy campaigns. And we were working together to create this policy framework and this report that could then shift practices within Metro as an agency. So like in terms of what to do with the knowledge and, the kind of things you create, it really was driven by what that coalition wanted and needed. And so, as designers and planners, we were focused more on, you may be aware of the kind of defensive environmental design strategies, that cities and police agencies have implemented. We were trying to flip that and think about community safety through environmental design, came up with a bunch of strategies and tactics, and then kind of fleshed that out in the report. Meanwhile, they've been, so most of our recs have to do with like care-centered space, stewardship, and programming. They've also been doing activations, at the stations to just even show like what's possible and talking to people and organizing them. And then also infiltrating some of the working groups and committees at Metro as an agency so that they can institutionalize some of these ideas. The other thing ACT LA has been doing is, because there's so much transit-induced gentrification and displacement, they've been building out a social housing campaign. You may know that the US no longer builds public housing anywhere. We only maintain public housing, and most of the affordable housing is through, vouchers or through like CDs, not the nonprofit sector. And ACT LA is exploring with the coalition partners how to actually build public housing, as well as, affordable nonprofit sector housing. And they wanted to work with a design studio to reimagine social housing, because when we think of social housing in the US or public housing, we think of Pruitt-Igoe, we think of the failure of modernist public housing and the subsequent demolition. They were like, well, what if social housing actually represented, communities who, need and want affordable housing? And what if we made it irresistible? What if it provided neighborhood amenities and, like really cool climate resilient features and was state of the art? So my class at my studio at Northeastern, we started out by mapping out how displacement actually happens to kind of better understand it. And we were also trying to create tools that the ACT LA Coalition could use as they train sort of resident organizers and transit users to, advocate for social housing in various sort of like city council meetings and hearings and things like that. They asked us to look into different case studies from around the world. So we did that. And then finally, they gave us 3 different LA neighborhoods, and we had partners that we were working with in each neighborhood, one around USC area. Jax, you're probably familiar with that area, which is like very rapidly gentrifying, and was historically more home to working class Black and Brown communities. Koreatown was another site, and the other site was Van Nuys, which is a bit more like, I don't know, maybe more like Cambridge, or maybe more like Somerville, I guess, where it's more sort of middle income populations as well. There's some community colleges nearby, and we're kind of thinking through like, what would affordable housing look like for community college students? So this is the one from the USC team. We worked with a local pastor along with some of the ACT LA members. And, it's just, I think for the architects and designers in the room, it's like, okay, yeah, we do that. But the challenge here was like, how do we actually reformulate design or, use our skills in ways that are envisioning what our coalition partners want, not what developers want. And, they wanted more of the kind of neo-Spanish colonial designs that have historically existed in the neighborhood. They wanted more, community spaces, et cetera. This one was in Koreatown, and it was really important in terms of entourage. Oftentimes we put like Scandinavian looking people into the renderings at the end. It was really important that we started with the members of some of the community organizations like KIWA, the Koreatown Immigrant Workers Association. So the entourage on the left was kind of based on that. There was a whole process. This one was the community college housing in Van Nuys. I feel like I should monitor the time and probably speed up so we have time for a conversation as well. This is, and I should say that the work in LA, it's ongoing, and they've been using some of these materials for kind of, public sort of education and training and organizing while they do that political sort of base building and organizing as well. In Boston, which is occupied Wampanoag and Massachusetts land, we've been really focusing on Roxbury and District 7, of which, Northeastern is a part, right, Jose? We are right there in District 7, next to the South End, next to Roxbury. And these are neighborhoods that have gotten wider, because institutions like Northeastern are growing. We are upscaling housing. We are changing the character of local neighborhoods. There's also the big hospitals, there's also all the kind of knowledge, we're all part of this knowledge-based economy, right? And service-based economy. There's a lot of tensions associated with that. The infrastructure in this case that I'm working on is more the art and culture infrastructures. So there's, I forgot to put a picture of Counselor Tanya Fernandez Anderson, but she is the counselor that I'm working with, along with the she calls them the Council of Aunties and Uncles, but they're long-standing community activists in Roxbury and District 7, truly elders, and they've been leading anti-displacement struggles for decades. And so they are advocating for public investments into sort of minor, or I wouldn't say minor, but more like secondary streets that are really important for long-standing residents, right? And so the proposed corridor would go from Jazz Square near the South End through Nubian Square down to Grove Hall. And there's other streets, like from Grove Hall to Nubian Square, Warren Street, which is that big street to the left, they're getting a whole resurfacing, it's getting redesigned as part of the BRT system, but Blue Hill Avenue is not seeing that public investment. So the idea is to establish cultural landmarks, commission artists, activists, and entrepreneurs to transform public parcels into community spaces and public spaces, to improve the streets, and then to really promote tourism and appreciation and respect of culturally rich BIPOC neighborhoods. And we'd be working with bodegas too, to have murals that actually represent the community, and also to change out some of the security grates and make the businesses more welcoming. These are small businesses. So these are different goals. Part of it's about economic opportunity and resilience, stabilizing community arts. So they're not just holding space while redevelopment happens, but there's a permanent place for community, representing kind of art, lifting up BIPOC culture, activating public and green spaces, beautifying the neighborhoods, improving street safety, and then multimodal, so like non-car usage as well. In terms of the research design and methodology, I started this in January of this year. I had a spring class, do action research, and then I have this fall anti-displacement studio that's continuing some of that work. And I'll kind of show you some of the work we've done, but we started out by mapping out the assets that are in District 7. We interviewed mostly Black artists from District 7 to ask them how they would approach the public parcels. We conducted street audits. We walked the artery. We canvassed the business owners and some of the community members. We interviewed them to understand what they were doing already to keep up the area and what the city should do to support them. And then we documented, shared this out with the Boston City chiefs and departments. And then this semester, we're creating an anti-displacement field guide to inform the artery as the city is implementing it. Just because art-based investments carry some serious gentrification and displacement risks, right? Just because artists are often harbingers of gentrification. So these are some photos of us doing the community asset mapping. There's a lot of assets. These are not all designated historical sort of, sites. And they pose a risk in terms of they can be demolished, and redeveloped as housing, right, that people can't afford. So receiving those designations are important. There's so many community sort of centers and, service providers, religious institutions, and art and murals that already exist. There's so many, living and historical figures. and organizations. Like this is a drop in the bucket. There's so many more. We visited design studio for social, is it social justice, social DS4SI. They're leading they're gonna be the home of a reparations lab. They're doing a lot of really cool spatial justice work. And just to kind of give you a taste of what the artist said, Jamil, so what my students did was they listened, we had these listening sessions, and then it's really visualizing the findings. So creating visual summaries, which are then shared out with city staff and city chiefs and departments to advocate for what, you know, the artists want, right? So Jamil is like, he's kind of a carpenter / jack of many trades. And he was envisioning laser cutter and like these kind of maker spaces where people can make things and sell them. He called it the weird market. Kalamu Kieta is an artist and he's an organizer. And he was noting that there's so many different kinds of artists, and it would be important to like pair them or group them around a common theme. So for example, like a puppeteer and a sound artist, and, you know, like a visual artist can do something around like healing, you know, that's for kids or something like that. And he even budgeted it out. Jason Talbot was saying that there's actually a lot of soft power in the community. People are talking and organizing all the time. What if we had physical spaces that could hold that and can make it really visible and somehow translate into like more kind of hard power building, you know, where like city officials could come and listen to them and, you know, that sort of thing. Mushin Kitta is a filmmaker. So he was talking about like projecting the people of Roxbury on walls and, you know, kind of telling that story, those stories. Aziza Robinson Goodnight is an artist and an organizer. And her thing was more about like, what are the principles and guidelines that we need to actually design vacant parcels? Like, how do we involve community members from the beginning and throughout? How do we make sure that they're compensated for their time? How do we ensure that public projects actually are sustained in spaces as redevelopment happens? You know, that kind of like respect and frankly remuneration, you know, that we need to have ethical sort of artistic engagement and community development. Nymphea Bellevue is a young artist who's going into the what's this art called? I forget. NFTs. So and she was noting that there's not a lot of Black artists in that space, and it's really important for her to be in Black spaces, Black affirming spaces, and to have a WeWork inspired studio that's kind of like that. Elson and Wilson Fortes, they are, they're twins, and they work together as well. And they were talking about not just having art and culture that's representative in District 7, but also where we have, you know, state, what do you call it? The Capitol, right? Like the state Capitol building and Boston Common and these places. So they were giving us ideas of how people could feel more belonging there. And Kai Grant, you know, who is behind Black Market in Nubian Square, she's done a lot of work already around art-based activation. So she had a lot of like very specific feedback for the city and also lessons that she's learned that she was sharing. And then what we did was just, you know, come up with recommendations for the city chiefs and departments based on the canvassing and the interviews that we did. And, you know, things that we heard were like, well, you know, long existing and up and coming commercial districts need support, and the city can put in investments on streets so that more people come and, you know, it's more comfortable and safe for people to visit these stores. Refacing and beautifying bodegas and corner stores with murals and great replacements and facade improvements. Assisting small businesses, not just on the outside, but on the inside too, to enhance product and service offerings for local communities. Digital technologies, how can they help on the front end and the back end, inventory, that kind of thing. And then how do we, you know, oftentimes new projects like redevelopment projects that are mixed use, they have these huge commercial spaces. How do we think of smaller spaces that are kind of for pop-up shops, you know, for local artists and entrepreneurs to produce and sell their work, almost like kind of like swap meets, but in more urban contexts. Arts and culture, you know, how there's so much art and culture that isn't on any map, you know, like how do we create maps and wayfinding signs? How do we commission new displays along the route? How do we make sure that these support the livelihoods of local artists and creatives? How do we contract entrepreneurs, artists, and culturalists to work with city-owned lots? You know, how do we start with things like banners on streetlights and poles to show the important history of the areas, hiring local youth as community stewards and tour guides so that when visitors come, they're able to be respectful, you know, and to actually learn and walk away with sort of action-oriented takeaways. Environment, energy, and open space, like there are green spaces. They don't have a lot of shading. Well, I shouldn't say green, public spaces, open spaces, not a lot of shading, not a lot of benches. You know, how can they be further improved? How can we prioritize Roxbury for actual like environmental or climate innovations instead of them being sort of the last to, you know, get attention or, you know, get resources. And then, oh, the other thing about environment and open space is elders and young people with climate change and displacement are at risk, at the greatest risk, right? And they really lack places, you know, to congregate, right? Where they don't have to spend money, where they feel safe. And so how do we create, you know, cooling stations and, you know, kind of shaded areas for them to kind of just hang out and be. Streets, you know, it doesn't have to be like entire street, you know, restructuring projects, but potted plants, trees, things like that. Street cleanings, pedestrian safety, you know, like things that most neighborhoods in Boston actually take for granted, but because of how racialized and segregated and unequal it is, that these are like things that we really need in along the corridor. And then, you know, the remaining question that I'm really researching now is how can reparative planning and design initiatives be deepened to amplify the efforts of reparations movements? Because whether we're talking about the ACT LA case of transit-induced displacement, or we're talking about Boston, where we have like displacement, right? And we're trying to use art and culture to, you know, really make and carve out and hold places. The reason that there's displacement risk is because of redlining, you know, and racialized disinvestment and misinvestment. The fact that public investments went to sort of suburbanizing, you know, more white or higher income areas. And that was, as you know, Ta-Nehisi Coates calls it, theft, you know, and it was stolen from rightful citizens and taxpayers, right? Not that we want to like bring people down to the level of their taxpayers, so they matter, but we can't address displacement without reparations, without addressing that historic and ongoing harm, right? So, you know, Boston's one of the cities that's sort of mulling over establishing a reparations commission. King Boston, which is funded by Boston Foundation, has established like a whole reparations planning initiative. They're running dialogues on reparations. So like with civic leaders and community members, just kind of almost mainstreaming reparations so that people understand it and can support it in different ways. This Boston Reparations Lab is just now getting addressed to think about harm, repair, and justice, particularly around different sectors and the built environment. So this is really exciting. So, you know, just some closing thoughts, right? Infrastructural mobilizations and experiments that are led by frontline communities, they're connected to anti-displacement struggles. And what's amazing and powerful, I think, is that they cross sectors and issues. So, you know, in planning and design, we have people who are like very niche, very focused. It's not like that, right, for frontline communities. And I think this is a really big opportunity for designers and planners to just like overcome, you know, the siloization and compartmentalization that is actually really kind of constraining and dehumanizing in a lot of ways. The rent gap, this is something I've been thinking a lot about. Neil Smith's whole theory of gentrification and how the rent gap is what, you know, developers and gentrifiers, they eye the rent gap. So there's the potential value of a property if it's redeveloped under the highest and best use versus the very low value of the property based on the current land use. So, you know, just kind of learning with ACT LA and learning with the Artery Initiative, what does it mean if we try to enhance the value under the current land use? So what if we fund and support long-time community residents to kind of, you know, improve their communities and neighborhoods? So if we could enhance the current value, and then what if we kind of shift what highest and best use means? You know, what if it's like the widest, you know, and the widest use, right? And like the most sort of widely beneficial use and mutual use. Fighting back and fighting forward. So, you know, a lot of infrastructure mobilizations start off by like, okay, we're against something, but then the cases that I've highlighted are like really kind of projecting alternative development pathways, you know, based on like care, you know, of neighbors and transit riders sort of caring for each other instead of being policed or, you know, relying on that kind of top-down controlled manner of urban and spatial governance, you know, based on dignity, based on safety. And then, you know, reparations and self-determination for racialized communities being important, and not, you know, professionals like trying to save them or integrate them into mainstream development, you know, in subordinating terms. I think that's really important for just repairing the urban environment and our social relations. And then, you know, questions about pedagogies and practices of reparative and planning and design. Like, what does that look like? You know, how do we teach differently in places like Northeastern or Harvard, you know, if we're going to teach people to do reparative work, to support reparations movements? So I'll stop there and see if anybody has reactions.
Thank you, Lily. That's great. Questions, thoughts? I like the reactions.
I have a lot, but I don't know if I should share because I already took up so much of Lily's time being her mentee.
Go for it.
I love your reaction.
I just think this is so rich. And when you're talking about pop-ups and the kind of interbeing of connecting with community and having more organic infrastructure that's reparative and restorative, I think of cities like New Orleans, where I am, and that's my bias, but I think as a nonprofit, even here, any sort of programmatic work we want to do, there has to be some sort of mutuality, if not mutual aid, right? And sometimes in a city like this, it's the culture bearers who actually are the real infrastructure versus the city or the state. And so how are we utilizing that in not just climate justice, but reframing what we visualize data as being is so essential. Like, what is valid data and how are we visualizing it so that it brings a level of epistemic justice versus this justice that is entrenched in white supremacy and a very Euro-American kind of education that essentializes that data is this, and, you know, this is change and this is justice, right? It's a living thing.
Yeah, no, I love that, because that whole what is data and then how do you visualize it? And especially when the data that we care about are people, you know, like community activists and leaders, it's different, you know, like the work that we do as designers, you know, or design action researchers, it's like listening to them and then trying to represent what they said visually so that other people can take away sort of the lessons and then act based on that. And that's what was like really exciting about listening, doing the listening sessions with the Black artists. We also did it with some of the neighborhood association leaders. And it's hard because stories are rich. And, you know, like that whole leaning into desire and not just damage. Like, I love how it's, you know, I love the words of that, but actually practicing it is really hard because like data is super thick and nuanced. And even when we listen to artists or community leaders, like the kind of what they share, there's so much of it, and like how to actually visualize that for people. It's highly discretionary, and you have to make choices, right?
Yeah, and I think like even following through that, by the way, this is awesome. Thank you so much. This is really great. Kind of like an interesting way of looking at. I love this anti-displacement field guide, so I want to know more about that. But this idea of who are we communicating to, right? Who's our audience, right? Because we do know that data it's difficult on its own. It's that it's all complex things, and who does the data for whom. Which are the groups that this is trying to be communicated to. So once you have that data, you have to kind of think about who are you then communicating into. And I think that audience is what is so important. And it's most of the time, in my experience, it gets missed, or that kind of point is sort of gets skipped. And it's like, we worked so hard on developing this knowledge, and then we're just going to output it out there and just let the knowledge go, and let and a little bit of care on that. I think it's very important to.
That is so true. Like, who is the audience? I wish we could time travel together and you could join the conversation Jackson and I had at noon today, because we were talking about audience and like, who are these tools for, and that whole like question. So, in the arteries case, we have community activists, artists who've been like advocating for public resources to support, artistic and cultural spaces, right? And public parcel activation and things like that. But then once they advocate for it and the city's like, okay, city departments actually end up implementing it. And there's no guarantee that it's going to be what the artists and the activists want, And so in our case, they're like, okay, well, the city councilor who comes more from an organizing and service provider background was like, well, can you help us create this anti-displacement field guide so that we can share it with folks in the city who are going to do some of this work, And so we end up being more like translators, in terms of like hearing from community leaders and then translating that for planners and policymakers and designers. And in a way, like, we kind of know how the planners and designers think and kind of how they operate, because we're all institutionalized in universities and like professional contexts that are based on whiteness and like white supremacy culture. So we know kind of how to present stuff in a way that can stick, but then we're trying to be more true and really answer to the community activists and leaders, and it's not seamless. It's not like straightforward, and I think there's lots of tensions and contradictions in the work that we do. We say anti-displacement field guide, but anti-displacement is like complicated. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many negative consequences that come from public investment after like decades of disinvestment, especially at a time when there's so many redevelopment projects that are like high end. It's like, yeah. So that audience question.
Did you find this idea of I love this map that you put in there where you have all the buildings and kind of say like, look, this is important. You got all this cultural buildings, you got all this cultural programming, that there could be some importance, or there could be some opportunity for developing these kind of spaces that maybe you walk through the streets and you might not know they're there. So it's just this interesting idea of poking into this almost, spaces that exist, that there's a lot of vibrancy in. And I wonder like how you find, how could you find, like, what are the questions then to activate those spaces? What are the ways in which we can like think about how to, get on those spaces and kind of engage with them, and obviously engage with them on a one-to-one level, on a personal level, not coming there and saying like, hey, I think this is what you need. But it's very interesting, like, to start mapping things like this, to start seeing that there are things that, and there are uses that are there, they're existing, and how can we kind of activate them or help activate them. It's just interesting.
Yeah. Some of the activation is already happening, by like neighborhood-based activists. So there's one church, for example, where they're trying to get historical preservation like designation, because then they won't be able to, then the city can't use it, or then the developer can't acquire it to put a multifamily like luxury housing development, because that's a risk right now. So a lot of those assets, like people know about them, but then they're not legible to the city per se, right? Because they don't have that designation. So we're kind of doing that translation.
Lily, I'm Alec. I'm at Harvard GSD. I just had a quick question, and your presentation was awesome. It was super interesting. I was wondering if you knew examples of this taking place in more of a climate change context, or dealing with climate adaptation or mitigation, where in a group of people or a community isn't necessarily the end direct beneficiary in the way that urban design works.
So who would be the direct beneficiary then?
I guess maybe an ecosystem or nature.
So I have to think about that and really kind of get back to you. The research that I do is more community driven. So I do have a bias, a selection bias in that way. And the Chicago case, the Sweetwater Foundation, for example, do they do climate adaptation and mitigation? Partly, like they took abandoned and vacant land and they started growing lots of food and, sort of native kind of, pollinator gardens and things. There's monarch butterflies and, different species kind of flourishing on that land again. This is a area with like extreme heat island effect, all that. There's cooling stations as well, in the summer. They're addressing food apartheid, but it's very community driven. It's very like direct effects on a target community,
I want to come back here because I think that is really interesting to me, because sometimes we think of infrastructure as the responses, or the infrastructure is what is going to help this community. Like, the water is we're gonna catch all the water in this neighborhood, and all our problems are just, no pun intended, wash away, right? But that is not really what happens, right? Infrastructure alone really won't do anything more than, in my opinion, in sort of, you need that interaction, you need that engagement, you need that community that is going to go back and take care of it. You need that community that is going to program around this infrastructure. You need to have this human and community component that is actually, it's going to take this infrastructure to the, that it's actually going to make it work and through the decades and feel that. So infrastructure sometimes to me, it's this, it's sort of this moments like, and I feel like planners and, this kind of practices, people love putting things on things.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, snap, totally agree, because so much of the emphasis is on like physical infrastructures, right? Water systems, highway systems, electric grids, things like that. And it's like, actually the human infrastructures, the social infrastructures are so important, and kind of when we think about food infrastructures, a lot of that is about supplies and, those relations and how they flow and, access and things like that. So Jose, we need to use our research budget and go visit the Sweetwater Foundation in Chicago again. And I was talking about it with Jax earlier, where they have a huge celebration around Juneteenth. And you can kind of see like how they weave together. They're weavers. I also really identify with the weaver role, by the way, because I was talking about those social change roles earlier. They weave together a lot of different aspects of infrastructure, but also just kind of, I don't know, like reparative and healing practices.
You're going to invite me along too. I know you have to run in a second and we want to move to Jose, but I just wanted if you could say a few words about the interviewing process or the process of approaching people in the research.
Yeah, so we don't really do interviews. We kind of just show up and do things that seem helpful. you know, and then listen and kind of learn, and don't really like schedule interviews per se. But we end up having lots of conversations and lots of findings. So it's more listening sessions and more like, these are the shared aims. And we'd love to hear you speak on these, and we'll listen, and then we'll take notes and share back what we learned from you in a visual way. And we love your reaction, you know?
And do you reach out to the people, or you're just at an event or something?
Like in Boston with the artists, for example,
yeah.
It was through Kalamu, who's an organizer who was working with the District 7, you know, advisory council and the, you know, counselor's office. And so this artery project was the aim. And he was like, well, I know all these artists, and they need to have a say in this. And, you know, everybody agreed, all the people there. And I was like, I guess you kind of lead with what you can do and what you have. And I said, I have, you know, all these students, and they're really good at listening and visualization. They were like, okay, well, let's do this, you know, and you kind of come up with it together. I guess that's how it worked. Yeah. It's much more embedded and conversational and relational that way.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Thank you, Lily. It's been great.
Thank you. I'm going to stay on and listen as long as I can until I have to go to pick up.
Perfect.
All right. So, Jill, should I go?
Please do.
Do it. All right. Let me get back in here. Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Lily. It was so awesome to really kind of get to know you here through this interesting networks, and thank you for having us here at the Climate Fellowship. This is a really great thing, great space to be talking about this really pressing issues that are, you know, happening right now around us. You know, we have not only climate, but political. There's just so many things going on. So my name is Sept. Thank you for having me. And I want to welcome you to One-to-One Design for Social Impact. And I want to start walking you through some examples of my responses to this week at times through design strategies, right? Because most of the work that I have developed recently is linked to the community that surrounds me. And so I want to share my experience around this question: how to aim to build strength, confidence, and trust through social impact strategies and bottom-up initiatives that responds to the need of our communities in times of a pandemic, social unrest, decolonization, and climate change. So this is a very, you know, this is a built question for, you know, for these times. And so I'm a landscape architect. I am marine science communicator. I'm a graphic designer in printmaking. I've been teaching for a while now at Northeastern as an assistant professor. And I have experienced all this in-person and remote teaching. And this is, you know, all this kind of stuff comes out. This is my studio here in Counterform, and this is us getting us a nice letterpress. And this is our studio here where we develop, you know, hands-on graphics for the community. And so a little bit of that is printmaking, publishing, while combining these traditional methods of printmaking with new technologies. And more than a studio, Counterform is a vessel that have allowed me to test and research ways to engage with communities that surround me, while applying a multidisciplinary approach that I have gained since I moved from Philly to Philly 22 years ago from Puerto Rico, where I'm from. This is Tatiana, my partner, on the right, life and work at Counterform. So we are together here. So even though she's not here today with us, I do want to make sure that her name and she's represented. And I'm kind of looking like that most of the time when I'm in the studio, like what's going on? So, and what's going on, because I don't know how you're feeling these days, but the word on the street and in the classroom is that we're pretty overwhelmed. I designed and printed this poster with one of our offset printers as a way to cope with my anxiety as I deal with this. And I keep thinking about this phrase, which is this climate, political, corona war chaos that we're living today. And so within this context, we can all agree that there's a lot going on in our streets. but there are also a lot of opportunities for making change within our reach. And most of the time we have to be creative and do what we can with the resources we have. And in my opinion, climate justice issues are not isolated. They're interconnected within the challenges that our communities face every day. I will start by sharing ways in which I have responded to the recent social unrest that we have experienced in 2020, sparked by the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And we started facing the social crisis that we're still dealing with. And as a result, public space has increasingly become a platform for denouncing social justice issues in our society through marches, but also as physical graphic interventions in our urban landscapes that amplified the protest messaging. In the summer of 2020, I participated in a collaborative effort along with the Print Like You Give a Damn Press Collective to design and print a series of posters for the marches and memorials in response to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and other issues pertaining communities of color. This is Jack here. He's my partner in printing and everything else. We designed and printed more than 15 bilingual posters with editions of 200 about each. This poster facilitated and amplified conversations around the topic of justice and change, Emory Douglas and the Black Panther Party, the celebration of Juneteenth. Also, Killer Mike words on the importance of planning, plotting, voting ahead of the presidential elections, while voicing issues for the LGBTQA community during Pride celebrations and these issues that continue to deal with on women's rights. We honor Judge Floyd with this poster and wanted to acknowledge today that he's the reason why we're here today having these conversations, of one of the reasons. His murder was a pivotal point that forced us, all of us, to confront the systems that that exist, of inequality that exists in this country. I also want to honor the hard work of Patrice Cancoolers, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tomeri, the women who co-founded the Black Lives Matter movement back in 2013 in response to the acquittal of George Zimmerman, the person who shot to death Trayvon Martin, an African-American teen, in 2012. But ultimately, we were thinking about the political future of the country, right, when we were there. And the importance of mobilizing the young community to vote in the presidential elections. And we disseminated these posters for free at marches and community events in Rhode Island. These posters contributed to create a graphic voice for the social justice movement across the state. And they have been displayed organically throughout the streets of Providence in storefronts, offices, people's homes, restaurants, cafes, bikes around the city. And just really, they kind of took this whole place. They just started to popping out, started to come back. And these posters were exhibited in the fall of 2020 at the Brown University Gallery. And State of Urgency, in the name of the show, which was the culmination of all the work developed during that summer by the collective. So we collaborated in the naming, branding, and exhibition design of the show. And although it was an interior exhibition, the show was meant to be viewed from the outside because of COVID restriction through its glass facade. So I used this constraint as an opportunity to use these ladder walls as a typographic mural that read "Rise Up," and sending a message of urgency and displaying everyone's posters there. So that was a little bit of that, and that's how it looked at night. And these ideas kind of came alive during the night, during the lighting and limited reflections. And this initiative helped us to connect what happened locally during that summer with college students and academics during the fall. And it's very interesting that now, today, these posters have been acquired by different museums or universities. And what's interesting about that, to me, the poster still lives outside, and that's where it should be. But at least it takes a spatial quality that allows the poster to be put in other conversations, and they let itself to continue the messaging. And public space had shaped the way we have been interacting with each other lately while we practice social distancing, maybe not that much too much, but I mean, I still do it. And people's opinion on public spaces have shifted to a point where strategies that landscape architects have been advocating for a long time have been put in place in our streets without too much bureaucracy, like turning streets for pedestrian use only. PVD Cares Outside, Nos Cuida Afuera is a COVID-19 relief initiative spearheaded by the Steelyard, an art organization in Providence. and the Department of Art and Culture and Tourism in the city of Providence. The strategy helped local businesses and organizations hit by the pandemic to expand their operation outdoors by providing kits containing traffic barriers, steel panels, and tents. We joined this project to name and design a bilingual friendly branding system that aimed to speak to a wider community in Providence, while also including the P for Providence and the Steelyard mark. So in a way, we're putting together the two languages at the same time as a way to kind of deal with this situation, not as a translation. And because of the nature of the surfaces that were the logos were going to be used, we needed to make it stenciled. So we get into the tents, we went into these traffic barriers, and we have fun looking for this sort of an identity that didn't feel too much like it was kind of welcoming. In addition to the logo, we designed a series of 3 COVID measure posters that were distributed to businesses and other government buildings. And these were, purpose of this were to follow the CDC guidelines of using masks, washing our hands, and social distances while using playful visual language and messaging. These things were disseminated to the community. It was the middle of winter too, so we wanted to do something very, a lot of high intensity colors to get people, but also really kind of creating more of a friendly conversation about it. I love this guy, just like a happy mask, right? And we were also invited to intervene in 5 kits of these parklets. We had a lot of fun bringing strong graphics while respecting and sometimes highlighting the construction of these objects. So we were there, spray painting, getting in there. That's, and really trying to develop something interesting out of them. And this is how they look after designing, spray painting them. And this photo was taken earlier that year when the parkers were deployed in the city. So these were not ours per se, the posters were ours. So, there were different artists commissioned to do this kind of work. So they were all, put throughout the city. And it's been great to see how the public has responded to this initiative as we have been taking it outside in that way. And you start to see how, how these things were kind of taking their own space in the city. Moving to the context of vaccine hesitancy, there are a lot of complex histories between health organizations and communities of color. The Rhode Island Department of Health asked me to develop a visual language campaign that speak to communities, BIPOC communities in Providence to speak, especially the Latinx and Cape Verdean communities here. In this project in particular, we worked in the Dominican neighborhood in Providence, Broad Street, where we interviewed the community about the reasons for vaccine hesitancy. After gathering data from these conversations, we designed and printed 3 posters that talk about these 3 messages. The one that I'm highlighting here, it says, yo por ti, tú por mí, which means I do it for you, you do it for me, to kind of have some sort of personal responsibility about this issue. And, the other ones also were kind of hinting on Latin American sort of traditions of, coffee and all this kind of stuff. And after we printed the poster, with our printers, we came back and visited the people we interviewed, and we gave them the posters. And we just came back. We were just having a lot of fun in there, and just really kind of, they were like, "Oh, you did that? That was so cool!" So there were some really interesting moments, and they were distributed along Broad Street, supermarket, offices, and to people around the neighborhood. And this is one of the last projects we worked on vaccine hesitancy, and this was encouraging communities to keep updating their COVID vaccines. This time we worked with the Cape Verdean community that lives around Providence and Woonsocket, Massachusetts, and I had the opportunity to work closely with Narina Omaras. She's a very active member here in the Cape Verdean community, and she mentioned something to me that was fundamental. Her community is hardly addressed in her language, right? So that's how we came up with this poster in Cape Verdean Creole, while using the dialect that is mainly used in the community here in the area. So this poster reads, "Dear Cape Verdean, get vaccinated or get your vaccines up to date so you can visit your beloved island safely." That's, that's the language in that. So, and it was interesting that, really the most important thing for me was to provide a piece that connect with this very traditional community and generate conversation around the topic while speaking their language, using their colors, highlighting their beautiful islands, right? And talking to them about the importance of traveling back home safely. Often there's a whole there's a whole music genre called Morna in coming from the Cape Verdean island, and it's really just about this longing of coming back to their beloved island. So we will try to do this more just as a poem, as a visual poem, rather than just get vaccinated. Moving into another health crisis in this country due to the spike on overdose deaths in Rhode Island and around us. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we team up with the Project Weber and Amos House, organizations dedicated to provide harm reduction and recovery support services, and to destigmatize topics on the substance abuse and further the conversations and engagement of the community towards reducing overdose deaths in Providence. We designed 4 bilingual posters and bus-stop ads that highlight the importance of community support to carry Narcan to reduce overdose deaths, as well as saving lives before it's too late, and to promote their initiative of carrying Narcan as a way to engage to the broader community. These posters have been disseminated around Providence in businesses, offices, but they also continue to be present in our community events. They just, there was a celebration for the overdose awareness day, and these posters not too long ago, like about 2 weeks ago, and this was they were still out there, and they will continue to provide those. And these designs were also used at bus stops to have a bigger impact in our urban community. And I think that most people can't see climate change because we're not used to visualize time. And it's hard for us to visualize our future in a month, 6 months, 1 year, 6 years. I mean, that's a great conversation starter, right? So especially in the uncertain world that we live here today, in where people experience housing insecurity, food insecurities, and lack of access to natural resources, within many other issues. So as climate change is an intangible concept for most people, the importance of applications like the ones mentioned above is imminent. Whether it's a sculpture or infrastructure, the translation of intangible concepts of climate into material forms are eye-opening for the lay public and are necessary to mitigate the consequences of climate change in our communities. When I was working up back in New York City in a sudden storm in 2007 flooded the city in a way that no one has experienced before. This is how the subway looked like. It felt very surreal and scary. Because of this, the subway had to shut down for 8 hours during the morning rush in New York City, which, as you can imagine, was a catastrophe for the mobility of its inhabitants. And I had the chance to work in this mitigation project, working at Marvel Studios, and I collaborated in the development of this 150 elevated stainless steel grates, undulating steel grates, replacing existing subway ventilation grates by blocking water from infiltrating the subway stations. The MTA flood mitigation system elevated grates to address water runoff and flooding. And the design features a permanent subgrate, which fits with the existing ventilation openings and attached to the floor barrier before. And more than media, the practical means these designs of the grates evoke the forms of waves. And this visual suggestion reminds people of the possibility that water could fill the streets in a playful, non-threatening way. I say that with a lot of worry, because I come from Puerto Rico, and we've seen the devastation of what flooding brings to our communities. And it's just want to put that out there, that this idea of water filling the streets in a playful, non-threatening way is something that I find myself in a lot of problems with that. So, or a lot of opportunities, I mean. In another effort to communicate climate change issues in public spaces in New York City, I pioneered with public artist Janet Swade on Move the City, New York City, a climate change arts initiative for the New York Major Office of Sustainability. Designed this vinyl dial faces designs for 3 public art gauge mirror sculptures that Janet put together. These sculptures measure live feeds from 3 data streams: number of people taking climate change action or promising to do so; the one in the middle, the amount of electricity being used in New York; and the third one, the number of people gathering across the street in the plaza at City Hall Park. This project was happening, and then COVID hit, and it was just so it's one of those moments that one of those things that COVID got. Another ways in which I've been looking at ways to kind of tackle and aiming to think about these ideas of climate and our effect in our communities. It's about and this kind of my interest in understanding science in order to communicate it as well. It pushed me to pursue a master's degree in marine affairs at the University of Rhode Island, right after graduating from RISD and over there as in graphic design. As a grad student over there and researcher, I led the Marine Affairs Visualization Research Lab under the direction of Professor Austin Becker at that time. And the lab conducted new research in technology in the visualization of storm and sea level rise impacts in coastal communities, and developed storm and sea level rise visualizations for the coastal towns here in Rhode Island of Water and Bristol and Barrington, and for 19 wastewater collection and treatment infrastructures. These visualizations combine three-dimensional modeling techniques with ocean and damage outputs. And while this was a very interesting and always very computer technology visualization map kind of moment, I really came back to this because to further disseminate these ideas on the environment, feel that sometimes tangible things and things that we can hold are and we can read and we can spatialize in our minds can give us perhaps more ideas, or perhaps more just possibilities for or make us more aware about these issues. So we developed the design for the 2021, and now we're finishing the next New Farmers Almanac for the nonprofit, the Greenhorns, up in Maine. And this Farmers Almanac is an antidote to the repeating stories of helplessness in the face of global pandemic, climate change, and social political unrest. It's a 400-page volume, dozens of contributing farmers, poets, grocers, gardeners, architects, activists, and designers all join forces to revision the future of food systems and land use in the U.S. So this almanacs printed and distributed by Chelsea Green Publishers up in Vermont, and they specialize in nonfiction books on progressive politics and sustainable living. And so we're getting the other one ready. So we're just really excited to being able to not only develop this design, this is all open source images, black and white, right? So it's a lot of work in getting this work together, but really not only just designing it, but really learning about how much energy is out there and how much interest is out there to communicate these issues. And now I'm going to switch gears and talk to you about a very exciting initiative that I've been working in the last 2 years, and this summer really kind of I was able to develop and get it done in a way, at least part of it. And this is a project about crafting ecological narratives in the landscape in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. This year, we're acknowledging and celebrating the multiple histories of the Blackstone River, an industrial river full of history that flows through Massachusetts and Rhode Island. We're reclaiming the Blackstone River as a commons that is part of our regional identity, a commons that can hold the many complex histories and challenges that require solidarity, active stewardship, and care moving forward. Just to give you an idea, this is the Blackstone River starting up in Worcester, comes through the Blackstone, Woonsocket, and Pawtucket, and then it kind of ends up in daylight's over there up in Providence. As it does, it makes its way into the bay. So water makes its way into the bay. And we are acknowledging the achievements of the past to improve the cultural and ecological health of the river and chart a course for a vibrant, resilient, and diverse future for the river. Apart from collaborating in the research, I am designing a communication strategy and that put it up to test this summer by treating the river as a human and amplifying the historical, marginalized, and current voices that live, work, and enjoy the watershed. So again, I developed this project along with Emily Vogler, an assistant professor in landscape architecture and research, and it's been funded by National Endowments for the Grants Art. We're collaborating with multiple organizations such as the Blackstone River Valley National Heritage Corridor, the Blackstone Watershed Collaborative, the Blackstone River Watershed Council, and the Office of Rhode Island Senator Reed. Our idea is to join forces, strengthen the narratives, and amplify the collective work in order to create a bigger impact in the communities and also in their environment. These are the three aspects of our project that aim to reposition the Blackstone River as our collective commons. First thing we did during this summer was to create a pop-up community engagement events, which we went to different towns along the river. The second one was an expedition down the river, a kayak expedition during the length of the river. And the third one, which is still, we are working towards that now, is an exhibition and a publication of the events, the engagement events, and the things that we collected along. And I mean, by that, I mean stories, objects, narratives that were collected through them. I designed a series of postcards that play with the narrative and highlight the importance of the river to raise awareness about its pollution. That sadly still happens. It was just in the news that people could not get in the water. To recognize and celebrate the connection of the different communities that live within the river, the different people, the different animals, and how we all use the river in different ways, right? We walk, we run, we bike, we kayak, we just have different uses, different cultures, different people have different things that they want to do along these spaces. And raising questions really, and understanding also and acknowledging the communities that have lived along the river for a longer time, and the ones that are still present, and the new communities that make up the watershed now. So this is the Blackstone River, the Native American communities that live through this around this river, called it the Kitakuk, right? There are the Nipmuc, Narragansett, and Wampanoag nations. And the Kitakuk, it's the original Nipmuc name for the Blackstone River, which means the Great Tidal River. And we also wanted to bring attention and awareness about the existence of dams and the way that we have treated our water system and how we have put so much infrastructure into them, and its repercussions for fish migrations around the river as well. So these postcards were, were made for dissemination. We also designed, printed, and distributed letters and addressed to the river, so people can write their thoughts or draw to the river. We have gotten a lot of letters, and we will document them in the anthology by the end of the project. One of the things that we did is we got a P.O. box. So P.O. box number 215 up in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And we've been distributing these letters through community events, high schools, middle schools, just people in general that want to write something to the river. And, the prompt is, if you could have a conversation with the Blackstone River, what would you say? And this is another, this graphic here that kind of happened from this bookmark idea was talking about the communities that live along the river. And I was very interested in not drawing the river as a line, because we tend to look at our environments always with lines or areas or hatches. And I wanted to really kind of just focus on looking at the river as a connector, right? As a connector of communities, as a connector of people, as a connector of different makeups. And that graphic, so Worcester, Millbury, Sutton, Grafton, Northbridge, Uxbridge, Millville, Blackstone, Woonsocket, Cumberland, Lincoln, Central Falls, Pawtucket, and Providence. That's what we're made of. That is what this river is made of. And we wanted to continue to care for that. We really wanted to take that graphic and put it out there. And we did shirts for it. And to invite people to our events, we designed and printed posters that were distributed all over the area. We also have an Instagram campaign and a motion campaign where we were like, this is a paddle party, come to us. We're gonna party, we're gonna print, we're gonna paddle, and you're gonna paddle, then you're gonna print. And then we're going to, have some fun and listen to speakers as well. So it was an engagement throughout different communities. This one is specific, what is in the Narragansett Brewery, down in downtown, but we went to, we went to Uxbridge, which is a very different environment. It was a more rural environment. And then we also went to Pawtucket. So there were 3 different engagement events, and all of them, they were different in their own way. And we all shared through social media, different ways to kind of think about how to, we paddle the Blackstone River, you come through here, you come to us, let's go and have some fun. And what was interesting about this is, like Emily in this way was, along with her team, they were paddling, they were paddling throughout these events. And we were, my team, for 4 days, right? And during this 4-day expedition, we were setting camp in the different places that they were coming through. And so we will set up camp there. We have a little letterpress that we take with us. There's Jack, that's Tati over there. Tati's there, Tati's somewhere, and then I got Jack's brother. And And we were just talking to people. We bring all this media that we created, printed, designed, and we went there and started to create conversations and really think about why we should protect the river. What are, why are we the river? What do you think about the resources? What do you think of, what is your thought on the river? And, we have it through this like nice little postcards. They were small and they were designed, made and designed that way, with the intention of being something that it's not, something that it doesn't think too much of itself, right? Something that is just available, a media that is really humble and accessible. And accessible in many ways, because you can put a postcard in your bag, right? You can put it even in, like, if you have nice pockets, you can even put it there, right? So this idea of small media, right? Small media is a way to just really get to be an icebreaker, right? Just an icebreaker. And this is how they look like. We did them on neon inks, and we really wanted to kind of capture that beauty of the summer and this contrast of the river, which was beautiful afternoons. And this were, there you have postcards, you have the bookmarks, you have the letters. And that's how, inviting everyone to make their own prints too. So one of them, we tell them, hey, we are the river. So we bring a half-made postcard. So then the community and the different people that came in there, they could do the other half, right? With the idea that they printed something. And this is how kind of things look like. It's a project, and half of it was like a lot of printing with people and kids and parents, and also on the right side is sort of us in the studio, right? Making it and making the postcards as well. So there was this kind of engagement in two ways with machinery and the card, the shirts. We were also printing on shirts. People were just just going in there, and I think that we all encounter natural resources from different standpoints. And what was interesting and continues to be interesting for me into this question is, how can we start engaging within these narratives? I believe, and my thought of it is that a postcard to me, people say, well, why a postcard? It's like a postcard lives in a fridge. A postcard, and if it's in a fridge, therefore lives in the kitchen. And the kitchen is where the heart of the conversations happen. So if we can put a postcard in a fridge up there, but that person made it, if that person can make it themselves, they're gonna put it there. If I make it, they might put it there, but I'm asking too much, right? So maybe if they make it, if they finalize it, maybe they feel that they own it, right? And they put some work on it, so they feel proud of it. And that was one of the things that we found out there that was so exciting. And people were like, I'm gonna put it on my fridge. And I'm like, exactly, that's exactly what I want you to have. So you can have these conversations about the river. You can have these conversations about caring for our natural resources and what can we do forward? How can we be stewards? How can we think about those things? And if these issues happen inside the kitchen, well, we have worked in another project that relates to these ideas of environmental communication, but in a more specific way. Going with the Flow, it's a bilingual environmental campaign that aims to communicate the work that the Roger Williams Park is doing and have been developing to deal with stormwater systems in the park as well as in the area. So this is a beautiful park here in Rhode Island. And what we did is it's located in a predominantly Latino area in the Providence area. So we decided to create bilingual materials and a communication campaign where we can take these posters, people can take them off, they take them to public schools. This is kind of like a traveling poster show. And what we did is we thought about this idea of going with the flow and thinking about all the Stormwater Innovation Center and all the different strategies that are being happening there. So, we started with a glossary describing a simpler way, the vocabulary that we as landscape architects, designers use every day, but the lay public can actually not understand what we're talking about. So I wanted to begin this whole idea with a glossary. Okay, what is stormwater? What is water runoff? Like, and then start communicating the water flow, creating illustrations that are easily identifiable, icons of the city, as well as depictions of what a home looks like for everyone in the neighborhood. Can I swim in the water? Why not? What are the things that are happening? kids love the fact that there was a poop. There's a dog poop there, and it was very interesting. That's all they look at. So I was like, well, that's good. But we also talked about why is my neighborhood flooding? What are the infrastructure things that have to happen in terms of urban design and all this stuff? What are we doing to improve the quality in the park? So we talked about bioswales, buffer plantings, rain gardens, infiltration basins. And where can I find the stormwater infrastructures in the park, right? So we develop a plan, a line, so people can go and see them. And we give them always a nice present of, and more plants and more remove asphalt and less runoff will equal to a cleaner water, right? So it's this idea of really thinking to bring these messages. And we have them here. They put them up in the park. Off and on, depending on the day, on the celebrations. They have also created all the ones. We're currently developing more work towards this. So we're going to do markers around these places now. So this is going to come later on. So we're very excited about this. Maybe I'm going to jump ahead and go into this project that I think is interesting in terms of increasing and really to talk about how my practice and research and teaching intertwine. Because I can continue to talk about the projects and engagement, but I think coming back to this is important because teaching is a platform to increase access and perhaps empower access through education. Where at Northeastern, where I am in arts organizations in Fall River or AS220 here in Providence where I work, I'm always trying to find these opportunities and make people that I work with, people that I teach, people that I engage, people that I work, people that I hang out with feel like they belong to the classroom and empower them to go through the world and start creating social impact themselves. So since the summer of 2020, we have been participating in a community building design effort over in Fall River that looks at revitalizing commercial districts around the city hit by COVID-19. I was a project mentor at a time during COVID and a coordinator for this nonprofit organization in Fall River called Youth Experiencing Artistic Hope, or an acronym, YEAH, which is awesome. And this organization pays talented high school students from underserved communities to take art and design classes and participate in community design projects. And this is one of the projects that I have developed with the students. It's a community mural called Viva Fall River that aim to bring an uplifting message to a hardly affected commercial district hit by COVID. This is how the corner used to look like. There was this shoe repair business, a couple leprechauns there, nice rainbow. But we wanted to do something different. And we looked at Viva Fall River was a song by Jorge Ferreira, a Portuguese singer who lived in Fall River for a long time and wrote this song as a tribute to the city for being so welcoming to its immigrants. So the song went like Viva Fall River, I don't know, so it's kind of like kind of an interesting welcoming song about, loving Fall River. And the mural pays tribute to the singer and uses the title of the song as a way to celebrate the Portuguese heritage of the city. Along with the other members of the community, the student drew and painted the mural and finalized this project during COVID time. So we were all there. This guy came in, he was like, hey, you guys, do you think if we can a videographer? And he came and was like, do you mind if I just record you guys? And we were like, sure. And then surfer something, really cool guy. So anyway, we got the video then after, and we just really loved the fact that he was able to portray, the energy of the students that we're doing at a time. The mural has activated this corner of the downtown area since then, and has impacted the space while turning it into a vibrant public spot for programming. So people, it sort of the sudden starts to become an Instagrammable place, a place where you can have tacos, which is always good. And also the students design and build sandwich boards that were distributed to businesses across downtown Fall River. So they built this sandwich boards. They took part in the design and the icons that we used. And they have to, talk to the business owners and be part of the, an average step of the building of these boards, right? And so this was the team at that time. There were a couple of them were missing, but we love them wherever they are right now. They developed this thing, and we were so excited to see these guys really just putting this stuff together and deploying them in the street, right? It's not the same thing as seeing them here, right? seeing them out in the street, right? All going in. And really, it really became an interesting sense of place, right? A sense of placemaking through this very small sandwich boards. And these students have taken the initiative of using resources available at the studio to create prints, shirts, and they're becoming entrepreneurs before even going to college, which is so inspiring because all these workshops that we have put together, all this work, they have applied it, and they're not even in school yet, right? In high school yet. So at this point, you can probably tell what keeps me up at night: thinking, planning, and designing bottom-up projects and initiatives that can have a positive impact in our communities. And this is definitely something we need to do together. And after so much time in isolation in the last couple of years, we need to come together, keep questioning and engaging in conversations with people around us. And this is a poster with it, and it's called, what is it? Juntos Together, right? To celebrating our togetherness in all these times, getting back to the work. So thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. It's very inspiring. I took lots of notes, or drew lots of pictures, maybe is the answer. But
lots of pictures. Oh, I want to see that. Share them.
Oh no, I can't share them. I'm drawing with an H pencil, so they're very light. It's what I have in front of me. But it's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, the energy is great of both of the work and you. And we have a fellow who's just had a second baby, but who's Puerto Rican and relocated to Philadelphia. So I thought of
Philly.
To Philly, yeah, he's in Philly. But yeah.
Puerto Rico. It's in my heart right now. Yeah.
Yes, for sure, all of us. Do you have questions or thoughts? Maybe do you want to say? Oh yeah, someone has a question. There's a question in the chat. Yeah.
Do I have any? Is this from Dana, the last?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So how do is there a way, do you have some stories of how people engage with my work, with the work that we do? Yeah, we do. We do. And I think it's very interesting because for the vaccine campaign, this idea of coming back, of having interviews, and thank you, Dana. Thank you so much for your kind words and for this question, because one of these things is we develop this, we deploy these strategies, right? And then they just go out, right? And some of them turn out to be really engaging and some of them don't, These are not things, they all not work the way sometimes we want them to work, right? But I have found that the ones that we have created have had a positive impact in our community. I still see, we just met with people at the Project Weber, which are, and people that have been working with the overdose campaign. And, I told them, hey, how you guys doing? Because, I walk and we see them and, jump into some of this coordinator in coffee place and say, how is the project? How you guys are doing? Do you guys need more posters? And they were like, no, we still have them. We distribute them. Listen, your project, and one of the things was, that I think that got me very kind of, impacted me was that, she said, these posters can save lives, and they do. You're putting something right in the middle of people that are in a very desperate need of answers. And sometimes maybe these posters don't give you answers, but they can calm you. They can give you some sort of perspective. One of the things that we found with the posters here that we did for the times of the, there were this unrest happening. We were voicing the youth, and the youth was carrying this stuff, and people were carrying this, not like you carry, a menu, unless you are really hungry, but, really with these things really kind of became a voice, right? They became a visual enactment of what they were thinking of what they wanted to hear, which I think that is the kind of thing that we were really trying to do, is to really kind of be solid in solidarity with the community, but also calming down the things, right? Creating, also voicing and echoing what the people were feeling, right? Without demanding or condemning, which I think that was a very interesting thing. With the parklets, we put them out there and people enjoy them. Restaurants took it, organizations took it, and we still see them around. The posters are still around. I didn't show a project that we did this kind of similar idea of putting posters. Maybe I'll just show it quickly, because I do want to. That is something that really works. One of the things that I can tell you the most about this project is that we did these posters to give this new middle charter school a new. This was a new building by BIPOC neighborhood, and there was a middle school, and we developed this campaign with them, where we did these posters and put them in their, in the fence. And we put them in there in a very, and some people were like, are you sure you're going to do this? They're going to get tagged. And we were like, no, they're not going to get tagged. They're not going to get tagged. And they haven't. Right. And now they stood the time, they stood the tagging time. So, it's a testament to really for the community around that sometimes we think that, oh, no, it's not deserving. Right. It's not deserving of good design, but not that we think it's what we do is good or not, but we responded, we care, and we printed something nice and put it out there. And I think that is all it takes. And I continue to monitor the posters in the park, and they haven't been tagged. We're like, oh my God. So it's a learning. It's been more than anything. It's a learning experience for us to see that. And how I know that they work, the posters and its campaigns, is because people put them out there, and we see them. We see them in different environments. So yes, they work. I think they work. But whether they work or not, right? That's also, I think that it's about trying things. And I think that's, because not everything is going to work, but at least we're getting closer. This engagement opportunities that we'll be having in the river have been very, very awakening for us doing this work, and really getting to engage with people that perhaps we don't engage every day with. You're in a rural community, a Colombian, a Puerto Rican, and a Haitian printer, talking about caring for the river. It's amazing. People are, we put these barriers that are non-existent. Everyone is willing to talk, and I think that's the idea, and I think that's what we're trying to do and reach. Right, this is about reaching and trying to really, meet people in the middle, and that's what I'm sort of trying to figure out. And I think, does that work? Yes, I think that works.
Yeah, it's nice. It reminds me that Mindy Thompson Fully Love is always a gift to bring the temperature down in the room. So in some ways, I think you're mediating that. Like you don't have a scale translation, like the work is 1-to-1, but I feel like there's other forms of translation that you're sort of doing all the time. So it's interesting, the title, and then kind of the sort of breaking down the communication. The other thing that really struck me is we're trying to make things simple so they reach people, which I think is a message that really came through with what you're trying to do. So that was really amazing to see.
Yeah, Yil, and I think that's that's a strategy that we have been, we continue to talk about, Tatiana and I, our team. It's how we can really try to talk, but like, how can we represent these things in a way that is accessible? And accessibility has many different levels, right? Of, what is that? What does that mean? Who is accessible? But really thinking about that, right? Like, and that's sometimes just a word, and that sometimes it's multilingual conversations. That sometimes it's color. Sometimes it's, forms that are not that intricate, or, it's just, I don't know. I think everyone has like, there's things that we all like to do that don't require a lot of energy and explanation. We just enjoy them. I'm just trying to get on those.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find out what those things are. That's sort of my trying to find those moments, you know, and how to translate that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Does anyone else have a question or? I mean, I think it's a perfect timing. We're sort of thinking about our projects and how to reach audiences and how to develop language around them and visuals and all those things. So it's really great to see the range of work and issues and visuals, all the different fonts and
I
colors.
think that's something, the colors. And I think that sometimes it's just, you know, the idea is that also, you know, in design, it's about outputting and outreaching. And sometimes it's just putting the work out there and not overcomplicated things. That's something that happens to artists and designers. It's inevitable. We all do it, right? But it's sort of putting that aside and trying to do that and really look at the issue, look at the message, look at who are you trying to reach, think about how long you want to reach them for, right? A conversation that is 5 minutes is very different from 5 seconds. So what are those? You know, what does that mean? What kind of engagement are you going to create in order to do that? So, you know, am I going to show you a poster from 10 feet away, or I'm going to show you a postcard for you to keep? You know, are you going to see a campaign through Instagram where you're just scrolling and finding attention, or capturing you're kind of like capturing people, right? Like, who are you reaching? What's your audience, and how long do you want to engage with? That will give you, maybe you can start extrapolating, and that might give you a media that starts to answer all those questions. You know, a lot of people say VR is gonna save us. Oh, very you know, three-dimensional, high-tech, super, you know, empirical information with ocean data, three-dimensional stuff that I've done. It's great, good, but you know, no intervention is too small.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You see, like, sometimes I argue, well, a map is much better. They're being around for a long time. Right?
Yeah.
So,
I love how you give us this like brilliant like art ontology, and then you're like, I don't know. I just have to comment. I find this work so tremendous because I play with, in this fellowship and just in life and in my doctoral program and everything else, I constantly think about the dimensionality of equality and equity and what that tangibly looks and feels like. And in my own fellowship here, like, I keep debating, okay, do I do story maps, or do I do something that's tangible for this community where they can feel and touch? And the gaze is different, the audience is different, and what that translation and universality looks like when you create something like what you've created, I think is very powerful. In social work, it really is a photo voice type of methodology. And so it's very inspiring, and I'm hoping we can connect. I would really love to expose a lot of your work to the young people I work with. Awesome. I was just speaking to a film producer right before this, and I feel like so much of what you're talking about aligns with their work. So
great. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate you, Jacqueline. Well, you know, I think, yeah, it's just, again, it's just the audience, and it's really kind of trying to get to understand who are we trying to, you know, who are we trying to communicate, and that, you know, typography, color, forms, all that come later, and you know, and that's something else. But you know, it's really about thinking about what the issue is, right? Also kind of understanding it too, right, in order to communicate it. So there are many different there are definitely different levels to it, but it's engagement, and I think it's putting it out there, and I think that's what we need to continue to bring those things out there. And especially I found that, you know, I was, I say my past life, but it really, but it is like, you know, I worked as a landscape architect for a while, and I've worked working in projects and infrastructure projects and all this kind of stuff. And to me was this, what that work is still informs, right, what I do right now, but because it's spatializing that, it's understanding the public, it's understanding the different relationships that exist, right, between the different participants of this wonderful, you know, communities that we have and cities that we inhabit. But really, it's about engaging, and I feel that that's something that is it's very important, and it's very present on the work that I create along with my partners, along with my group, and it's this idea of constant direct engagement. Whether it's a branding camp event, where branding that takes a year to put out there, or just developing some posters and giving them away for people and let them where they go. So it's different levels of engagement.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks for joining us. I also think it's interesting, you know, the fellowship has been largely digital, and we had imagined largely digital outcomes, but I think people are pressing us on that and making physical things, and or imagining how they can make physical things or have engagement. So it's nice to see the like.
Right. Well, it's too because probably
space.
Yeah, and it's probably because of, you know, COVID. A lot of people were dealing a lot digitally, right? So people are kind of, you know, the tangibility of things is wonderful. You know, when you see someone, I mean, the web interactions are very effective. You can reach many people, you know, you can really put your work out there. So if I would say in terms of web, keep it as simple, as flat as possible, right? It's not, you know, our platforms are not for over designing, right? It's just state the issue, describe it, do it, and that's your work, you know. And one of the things that I found that are very interesting that supplement that is a vibrant, energetic, a fun, a social media campaign, right? Where it's not just about what I do, but you can kind of feed off from that and kind of complement and keep things and answer questions or post questions and, you know, give, you know, so it's sort of using media as an ecosystem itself, right? Where, you know, I have a postcard, but that postcard has that shirt, and that shirt also have a different special print that I'm giving to people, but I'm also have an Instagram, and I have a website, and then I have, so all these things are kind of working together, right? And they're feeding, and they're doing a specific, they are fulfilling in a specific audience.
I like that. I'll leave it at that. Yeah. Media.
I'll leave it at that. And we'll see. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. We'll keep trying. Right?
Yeah. I like that attitude too. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I look forward to more conversations. So
yes, let's keep talking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.